Good morning, everybody. We have the lovely Paulette Eccleston here to show us one of her latest projects called Bearpaw Variation. This woman is just amazing. Like, where do you see all the different fabrics she uses in one quilt? Okay. She did keep the sashing the same and the border. But other than that, she was an animal. So go ahead, Paulette, and show us what your stuff.
Good morning. So yes, we're doing a Bearpaw variation. So this is a traditional Bearpaw block. So it's like these are the paws of the bear. You've got toes and you've got the pad. And there's four of those sections in the block, I guess for 4 feet on a bear. So what I've done today is just taken one section of this block and blown it up to a 9-inch block. And then put all the blocks on point this direction and sash them. And there are 41 blocks in this quilt, and it's about 77 by 77. So it's a nice generous lap or a small
would
bed.
go on top of a double.
Yeah, be great.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple block to make. The pieces are fairly large and there's not a lot of them. So you are going to have 6.5 inch by 6.5 inch cut square for the pad part of the paw. And you are going to need 2 pieces of background that are 4 inches by 4 inches. And you need 2 4-inch squares of whatever color you're going to make your little toes out of. And then you need 1 extra little background piece that's 3.5 by 3.5. And that, of course, is going to go in this spot here. So what I kind of liked about this design was that you could put it any direction. So it could be flowers, or the bear paws. It could be fish swimming one direction.
Okay.
It could be jellyfish swimming up this way, or rocket ships going up that way, or, so whichever way you happen to throw it on the bed, it would be just fine.
Perfect.
So it's nice and versatile, and because it's square, you can do that. There isn't any restrictions on what the design is by the size. So that was kind of fun playing with that. So you only need 6 pieces to make each one of these blocks here. Now you are going to get a chance to make half square triangles, because these toes are little squares that are half square triangles. So my favorite method is to take, I cut 1 inch larger than my finished size. So these little toes in the quilt here are 3 by 3 finished. So that's why these are cut 4 inches. So I layer my toe on top of my background, and then I'm going to draw a diagonal on the light fabric. And I do have this one here. And I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on both sides.
Close up so we can see that line there. Nice. Okay.
Scant 1/4 inch on both sides of that line.
And what is your stitch length for doing this?
My stitch length is a tad under 2.
Okay.
I do like it quite tight because I am going to trim it in the end, so the ends are,
and you don't want the whole thing to unravel.
Yeah, I want it to stay nice.
Okay. So, and are you locking your stitch at the beginning of the stitching row or not?
I do not on these because I am trimming it.
Yeah.
So I could be cutting them off anyway. So I just lower, my stitch length instead, so that I have nice tight stitches there.
Okay.
So we're drawing a diagonal, sewing on both sides. We're going to cut those into, you'll get 2 sections. So I'm just going to see.
So then you slice it open on the drawn line after you've stitched on either side.
Yes. So, and what you end up with is a piece, that looks like that. I press towards the dark for this particular project because I'm not I don't have to nest any of these points. So it's okay to just press them all towards the dark. So it could be your background or it could be the toes. And you're going to end up with 4 of these pieces from these 2. Whoops, what did I do with the other one? There. So you're going to end up with 4 little toes that you can put on the Bearpaw. And then you're going to sew them together into 2 and 2. So you're going to end up with 2 that are going that direction and 2 that are going that direction. So that's how you sew them. Oh,
I see. Okay.
So I'm sewing them like that, and those directions are in the pattern, and also it tells you which way to press.
Okay.
So we're going to make these 2 sections with our half square triangles. And now it's going to be really easy to put together our little block because we have everything, all the basics that we need. So I'm just going to let those guys fall down. So if you look at the sample that's in your pattern, it will be orientated like this. And so you're going to take this one, whoops, this one. How did I do that? This way. Okay. Yep. So you're going to put that one there, and you're going to put this one there. Okay. And you kind of see these 2 little guys are going to be touching, right?
Okay, so I just want to back up a little minute here.
Yeah.
You said you start off with your blocks a little bit bigger, and then you draw your diagonal line, you stitch on either side, you slice it down the drawn line, and is it now the exact measurement, or do you have to trim it from there?
No, you have to trim it because, mathematically correct, you would be cutting a 3 7/8 inch square, and I cut 4 inches.
Okay, so when you're trimming it, what is the most important thing that do you line up that diagonal line on the ruler, or what do you do?
I do. I have a particular ruler that I really like for using half square triangles, but you can use any ruler that has a 45-degree angle on it. So when you're trimming these, you want to make sure that this diagonal line is still coming out at the points. So I always do, line that up, do one side, and then I'll turn it over and make sure, slide my ruler till I get to 3.5, and then I will.
Okay, so then when you sew the 2 pieces together, is there anything in particular that you're going to be paying attention to?
When you're sewing these 2 together? Yeah. No, just making sure that they are in the right, like if you lay them out like this, then you know that you're sewing this one to this one. So you have a seam there, and you know that you're sewing this one to this one.
Okay.
And then, once they're trimmed and this seam is made, they are the correct size to be in the block.
So you will be able to, from there, I'm just going to close up in here, and you can see where she has stitched along here.
Yeah.
And then right there, she crosses over the diagonal, but it's a 1/4 inch from there to there.
Okay, yes, and that's not something I tried to do. It happens because this is a 1/4 inch all the way along.
Right.
And the inside, even though my center, I said scant 1/4 inch, I sew even a little bit more than scant.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit less than scant.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you look at the back, you'll see that my seam there is not a 1/4 inch, but it's very secure. The stitching my machine does wonderful stitching, and I am very, secure that that's not going to have any issues. So it's the finished size when I trim that I care about. This doesn't matter anymore. It's just holding those 2 pieces together so I can make a square that is 3.5 by 3.5.
Okay.
So these 2 sewn together are going to be the exact size that you need to add to this piece.
Oh, look at that.
And these 2 that you have sewn together, and it's not pressed here, is the exact size that you need to sew to this one in the corner. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to sew.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is there an order? Okay, so you do the top,
So you're sewing these set of half square triangles to the top of this square, and you're going to sew these two to the,
Oh, I see.
you're going
Okay,
to
so
add
then
this
you
to
then you
this.
add this piece at the top to the other strip so that it becomes the other side.
So
Yeah,
then
because
now
you've
you've
added
got,
it. Yeah.
and now you have a unit, and you're pressing this towards this where there is no seams, pressing that way,
Yeah.
and you're pressing that way. So now when you go to sew these two together,
They're going to nest.
yes. And so the only thing I watch here when I do this is that this one nests nicely. This one isn't touching anything. It doesn't have to nest, but I always sew from this side because I want to try and hit that 1/4 inch, that little spot.
Right where it crosses.
Yeah, so that when I do sew it and I press it,
you will have perfect points like Paulette.
Well, I don't know. You can kind of look and see they're pretty good.
Well, Paulette.
They're not all perfect.
They're perfect. They're perfect. Trust me.
So this final section that you're adding, you're going to sew that on there, and you're going to press towards this big piece here. Now you don't have to, because I put sashing in between. We're not. If I hadn't put sashing, you would be trying to match up this with this point. So you've got 3 things there and 3 things here, and you would be trying to match those up.
Let's just get the sashing.
So putting the sashing in, I think, eliminates one of those challenges. And I kind of like how it frames each blocks, and it kind of keeps the scrappiness under control. Because sometimes when you're doing scrappy, you've got so many things touching each other. It takes your brain a bit to kind of, get used to that. And I think this just kind of makes it just a little bit more calm than it normally would be. So the sashing that I've added here, and when we're finished this, we're going to be putting them on your design wall on point. So you're going to have, all these guys sitting like this, and just kind of move them around however you think you might like it. And the only thing I would say about this is that if you have something that has quite a light color, you might want to put it in the big part so that you see lots of it.
Right.
This particular block for me was a reject from this quilt, because once I got back from it, and that's before the sashing was on, these toes, although I thought they were quite different than the background, really just faded into the background.
But interesting, because the piece beside it, you put a light color here.
Yes.
And a dark there. But this light is just fine because of your sashing.
Yes, and because it's a big piece. It's like one piece to kind of look at. So I didn't pay any attention to light or dark on some of them. There's a dark pad and lighter toes. On others, there's a dark pad and, that's dark and lighter toed. Here is more light than the toes. So you can go either way. Just have a contrast with your background and between the 2 colors that you choose for the block.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun just picking 2 colors and putting them together, and I don't try and match. I've got vintage stuff in here. I've got modern stuff. This might even be a polyester cotton blend. I'm not sure. Somebody gave it to me.
There's horses in horseshoes.
Oh, yes. Horses in horseshoes.
Yeah. And then we have rainbows.
I've got fish. I've got wheels, snowflakes.
Oh, my gosh. This woman she's just, oh, my God, she's fearless.
Well, it's just so much fun just putting stuff together. And I kind of get carried away. And then all of a sudden I have 40 blocks. So I have to make a big quilt.
Yeah.
So the sashing is cut 1.5 inches wide.
Yep.
And it is a little tricky when you are sewing on point, because you have to sew them in diagonal rows.
Yep.
And so the first row is actually a setting triangle, a block, and a setting triangle. So that's row 1. Row 2.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
and that's where the gray comes in. Okay, the background cover.
Yeah. So this for me, if you look down on so that's row 1, that would be row 2, row 3. So you need to cut, because these are 9-inch squares finished and they're 9.5 unfinished. So I'm adding 9.5-inch pieces to all these blocks in between to make that row. And we're not talking about these guys yet, just attaching the blocks to each other with a 9.5-inch place. And then you're also going to need to make these rows so you can have sashing in between these rows that you've made here.
And those will be joined together to make one long strip?
Yes, but I do cornerstones.
Oh, okay.
I love cornerstones because I feel like it keeps your quilt square. I know you can't see it. There's no advantage to the design to having it there.
Yeah, but it keeps it from warbling.
It does. You know that's 9.5. It has to fit. There's it's cut 1.5, so it's 1 inch finished.
Yeah.
So that fits, then that fits.
Wow, great
so
tip.
It just keeps it. I think it's a little extra work, but I just find it works for me.
Gives you a lot more control.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Because you can make a long strip, and on one side you might be sewing it, and the other side might stretch a little bit or something. You get all these little puckers all the way up. So I prefer to do them like that. Yeah. So on the ends, you are going to have to make a longer piece, and that's all in the pattern. So we've added 9.5 here, 9.5, 9.5, 9.5. But when we're making this long row, this is a 9.5 because there's a square there. But then this one has to go all the way for the 9 plus the sashing.
Right.
So the pattern tells you how long to cut these pieces because they are extra long.
Right.
Now, setting triangles, because it's square and because of the 5x5 grid, you have 4 setting triangles on each edge, which is great. You're going to cut 4 18-inch square background pieces, cut them twice diagonally, and then all of those triangles are going to fit exactly all the way around, and there's no waste. I used an 18-inch square because I wanted these to float a bit. I didn't want to finish right on the end here and then be adding my border because, again, I'm going to have to try and hit all these points.
Yeah.
So I thought, why not just cut it a little bit extra and have all of these guys floating out here, and then I don't have to deal with that. So after you have all your rows sewed together, including the setting triangle. So you sew the setting triangle onto this block with the sashing, and that makes one row. And then you just keep going all the way. I usually start at one end and I work to the middle. So the middle one is this row here. And then I start at that end and work towards the middle. And then I add all of this to the middle row and all of that to that. It seems to work out quite well. I added a 3-inch cut 3-inch border, so it's like it'll be 2 3/4 when it's finished. And I will be putting a blue binding on it because I personally always like to have the binding the same as my border. But it's such an easy block to sew, and the sashing is a little bit more work, but I think it's worth it because I think design-wise it helps the quilt. And it does eliminate some of the points. You will have to be, trying to hit these points. Yep. But when I sew those, I have the block on top, the back of the block, and then the sashing underneath.
Yeah, so that you can make sure you go through that
I can
cross
see
point.
Those points, and so I go through there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a variation of a traditional block, blown up a little bit bigger. So
it looks fantastic, Paulette.
Yeah, thank you.
Love it. It's almost kind of summery looking, I think.
Very pretty. Why not?
Yeah, why not? And of course, she's coordinated with her quilt because she's that kind of girl. She's got a beautiful dress by Blue Sky on.
I did.
Yes, it is gorgeous. It is beautiful. Anyway, I'm going to say thank you to Paulette for a fabulous, fabulous lesson. And I love that idea of the cornerstone instead of one long strip that's 1.5 inches that warbles and twists and does all sorts of weirdness. That is what a game changer. I should take the day off work now and go home and try that. Okay, everybody, you guys have a great day and enjoy our little video. Thank you. Bye-bye.